President mentioned during this meeting that he had received some information about Guo Wengui at a dinner the previous night. Have you been aware of Ms. Guo before this meeting in Oval Office? The counsel asked, and then we received the response. It say, the witness, which is Pottinger, say, the topic in the Oval Office was about Guo Wengui, and international police alleged wanted him, and that a friend of the president had told him that it would be helpful to having him extradited from the United States back to China, and that friend you would later see is a Stephen Wynn. Yeah, it came up in a conversation. It was casino magnate Stephen Wynn, who was a friend of President Trump. Although I do remember the Interpol red notice in the photograph of Mr. Guo. If you recall, on April 18th, 19th, the Chinese foreign minister also announced that Interpol just issued a red notice calling Miles Guo an international fugitive. So Matt Pottinger remembers seeing an Interpol notice on the file when Trump brought this conversation. So after that Oval Office meeting, did you have any additional contact with government official, anyone from China regarding Miles Guo? At a later point, the Chinese government approached the U.S. government about Guo's case and also asking for him to be extradited. Do you record whether a delegation from China actually traveled to the United States to meet with Mr. Guo and discuss this issue? Pottinger said, yes. I learned from the Department of Justice that a group of Chinese security officers have been operating illegally, again, illegally, in the United States, trying to coax Mr. Guo to return to China. The U.S. government was not informed and had not issued a visa for that activity. It's not authorized, so that's why it's illegal. And in fact, the visa that was issued to these officials was inconsistent with allowing them to do Chinese law enforcement on U.S. soil. The Department of Justice, the FBI, had been following the delegation and told the Chinese security officials they had to leave New York and go back to China. My understanding was they escorted the Chinese official from New York back down to Washington, D.C. What happened next, if you know? The Chinese official ignored the warnings from FBI and went straight back to New York to try to coerce Guo again, to return again. Were they successful in convincing Mr. Guo to leave with them and return to China? They were not. Fights in the after that trip and that delegation, were there any formal attempts initiated by China to try to extradite Guo that you are aware of? There was meeting with the State Department and also a delegation for Chinese government to the White House to ask for him to be extradited. So that talks about another person. My recollection was it was the deputy chief of mission, basically the deputy ambassador of the Chinese ambassador. So there's a multiple plans, multiple people repeatedly want to doing the same thing. Did you have due process concern about the proposal from the Chinese government to extradite Guo without going through judicial process? The witness say, certainly. Did you work with individual named Rick Waddell at that point? I did. Rick Waddell was the Deputy National Security Advisor, and I was Senior Director for Asia, so I reported to him and the National Security Advisor. What that about the request to extradite Guo? Entirely. During any of these meetings or any of those information that you were provided, did anything come up regarding the return of hostage being held in China in exchange for extradition of Guo? I do remember the Chinese side talking about being willing to remove Chinese criminals from the United States that the U.S. government has been trying for many years to extradite. So I can tell you, indeed, on top of the $3 billion, but in the negotiation, $3 billion scheme that I just read, they promised the royalty. In the conversation trying to influence Trump, they also offered not only taking 20,000 illegal Chinese immigrants, accepting them to be deported back to China. They also offered 2 U.S. spies for exchange. And also on top of it, they offered the North Korea package. Okay, so that's how important is Miles Guo.